A perfect score, a famous name, a truth too big to stay hidden. When Jasmine Crockett faces Barron Trump in Congress, she reveals more than a SAT test, she exposes the game of power behind it all. Can one woman's courage shake an entire dynasty? Stay with us, this is a story worth every second of your time. White lights flooded the congressional chamber, bouncing off marble columns and trembling camera lenses. The air crackled, hundreds of reporters leaned in flashes, firing like lightning. On the massive LED screen behind the dais blazed the words, "Special Hearing Political Influence" in the U.S. education system. At the center sat Jasmine Crockett, steady as steel in her black suit, a red folder marked "Confidential" glinting before her like a loaded weapon. Across the table, Barron Trump lounged in defiance, tall, youthful eyes sharp with entitlement, two high-priced lawyers at his side whispering strategy. The tension was unbearable. You could hear hearts beating beneath the silence. The chairman's gavel slammed. "This hearing will come to order." Jasmine rose, her voice cold and cutting through the static. "Today," she said, "we're not just talking about test scores. We're talking about the honor of America." Gasps rippled through the room. The battle had begun. The room still buzzed from Jasmine's opening words when she stepped toward the center of the chamber, heels clicking like a countdown. On June 12th, 2022, she began her tone. Sharp, deliberate, Barron Trump sat for the SAT exam at the Arlington Testing Center in Virginia. She turned to the technicians. "Please play the security footage." The lights dimmed. Every camera lens pointed at the giant screen behind her. The air felt electric, almost humming with suspense. The video flickered to life, grainy black and white footage from the test center's hallway. A young man in a baseball cap and mask walked briskly toward room 3, shoulders hunched, eyes down. The timestamp glowed 7:59 a.m. Gasps rippled through the room. Reporters leaned forward, zooming in with their own cameras. Then as the technician enlarged the image, the face under the cap became clearer. The realization hit all at once. It wasn't Barron Trump. It was someone else. A wave of whispers erupted through the chamber. Lawmakers exchanged shocked glances. Flashbulbs went off like lightning. A congressman murmured under his breath, "That face completely different." No mistake. A few reporters scrambled out of their seats to get better shots of the screen, their voices overlapping in disbelief. The tension swelled until even the sound of breathing seemed too loud. Everyone turned to Barron. He stared straight ahead, jaw clenched, refusing to flinch. Suddenly, one of his lawyers jumped up, voice slicing through the noise. "This is fake," he barked. "Deep fake technology can make anyone look guilty. You can't use this as evidence." The words echoed through the room. Cameras snapped toward him. Others stayed fixed on Jasmine, waiting for her counterstrike. For a heartbeat, the entire nation seemed to hold still. Jasmine didn't move. Her hand reached calmly into the red folder. She pulled out a crisp document stamped with an official blue seal and held it up for all to see. "This," she said evenly, "is a verification report from the Federal Digital Analysis Agency. This footage is authentic. No edits, no manipulation. And according to phone tracking data, Barron Trump's device was located in Palm Beach, Florida, 1,500 kilometers away, at the exact same moment this video was recorded." A sharp gasp tore through the chamber. Every flash fired at once. Barron's face turned crimson. His hands slammed onto the desk with a thud that echoed against the marble walls. "You're fabricating this to destroy me," he shouted. "You play politics, I live reality." His voice cracked on the last word, half fury, half panic. One of his lawyers placed a hand on his shoulder, whispering for him to calm down, but he jerked away. The crowd murmured, the tension mounting like static before a storm. Jasmine didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "I'm not destroying anyone," she said quietly, each word precise, cutting. "I'm just showing the truth you tried so hard to hide." Her tone was steady, but her eyes locked on Barron's with unflinching intensity. The silence that followed was heavier than any outburst. No one moved. Even the cameras seemed afraid to make a sound. Then as the screen froze on the masked figure, the only motion left in the room was Barron's trembling hand gripping the edge of the desk. His anger had shifted into something else, fear, disbelief, humiliation. For the first time, he looked small. The chairman exhaled, his gavel still hovering in midair. Around him, the audience stayed frozen, suspended between outrage and awe. Every heartbeat felt amplified in the silence. The truth had landed, and the room would never be the same again. The storm had only just begun. The silence that followed was thick enough to crush the air. The chairman finally leaned forward, his voice echoing through the chamber. "Mr. Trump, you may respond." Every camera turned toward Barron. He rose slowly, straightening his tie, his expression a mask of cold defiance. His voice rang out clear and firm. "I did not cheat. I earned my score through intelligence and hard work." He looked around the room, scanning every face as if daring someone to doubt him. For a brief second, the chamber seemed to belong to him again, until Jasmine moved. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she opened a golden envelope, her movements calm but deliberate, the soft crackle of paper slicing through the silence. Inside was Barron's original score report, 1600 perfect. She placed it under the light so everyone could see the flawless numbers gleaming across the page. Her voice was measured, surgical. "If you did this honestly, I have just one question," she said, eyes never leaving him. "Why did the college board system log your completion time at 14 minutes? A murmur rippled through the room. Barron blinked, jaw tightening, a flicker of panic crossing his face. He leaned forward sharply, voice rising in anger. "That's a technical error. The College Board has had glitches before." He slammed his hand on the table. "You have no proof beyond speculation." His tone cracked between rage and desperation, sweat glinting at his temples under the hot studio lights. His lawyers exchanged uneasy glances but said nothing. Reporters typed frantically, the sound of keyboards filling the air like rain on metal. The chairman tried to restore order, but the momentum had already shifted. Jasmine lifted her chin. Her voice dropped, calm but lethal. "No, I have the server data," she said, "and I have the command log showing a manual override. Skip exam timer, executed by an internal user named Admin Trump Foundation." The words hit like a bomb. The screen behind her flickered to life, displaying the digital command line in glowing white text. "Override timer, user Admin Trump Foundation, access granted." The image filled the chamber. Gasps broke out, chairs scraped. For a moment, the tension became sound itself. Lawmakers shouted over one another. "What kind of access is that?" one demanded. Another stood up, pointing at the screen. "That account, who owns it?" Jasmine turned to the chairman, her voice firm but steady. "It's registered to a financial entity under the control of the Trump family." The room erupted. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras flashed. The heat of scandal filled the air like gunpowder. Barron's composure snapped. He slammed both hands on the desk, shouting, "You're dragging my father's name into this. You're a political opportunist." His face was flushed red, sweat trickling down his neck. One of his lawyers tried to whisper something to him, but Barron shoved the hand away. His breath came hard, and uneven, fury and fear blending into one. Jasmine didn't blink. Her voice cut through the noise like glass breaking. "I didn't mention your father," she said, every word crisp and deadly. "I mentioned justice. And justice has no last name." The line struck the room like thunder. Cameras snapped, lawmakers froze mid-motion. Barron's shoulders slumped, his defiance draining into silence. He sank back into his chair, eyes dark, lips pressed tight. Around him, the clicking of cameras filled the void like a ticking clock. The energy in the room shifted from chaos to the stillness that follows an explosion. No one spoke. Jasmine stood motionless, unflinching, as the screen behind her glowed with proof too heavy to deny. The confrontation was over, but the reckoning had just begun. The chamber still trembled from Jasmine's last words when a sudden creak split the silence. The heavy double doors swung open. Every head turned. A man in a gray suit stepped inside, clutching a sealed envelope. His steps echoed against the marble floor, steady but heavy with purpose. The clerk whispered something to the chairman, who nodded sharply. "State your name for the record," he ordered. The man straightened, his voice low but firm. "Robert Klein, Regional Director, College Board, East Division." A ripple went through the room. Jasmine turned slightly, her gaze unreadable, while Barron frowned, sensing danger. Robert Klein stopped at the witness table, placing the envelope in front of him. He hesitated for a breath, then spoke, his voice trembling with restraint. "I was instructed to remain silent," he said, "but I can't anymore." He glanced toward Jasmine, then at the cameras lining the walls. "I have copies of internal emails, evidence of score manipulation." The entire room shifted, bodies leaning forward in unison. Barron's lawyers exchanged panicked looks. Barron's jaw tightened. The chairman's gavel struck once. "Proceed, Mr. Klein." Klein unsealed the envelope, the sound of tearing paper echoing like thunder. He drew out a printed email chain and handed it to the clerk. "Read it," he said. The clerk adjusted his glasses and began, voice echoing through the hall. "Insure candidate number T214983 receives a score of 1600 as arranged. Payment processed through Atlantic Education Fund." The sentence dropped like a bomb. Gasps, shouts, the shuffle of papers all exploded at once. The air turned electric. One congressman stood shouting over the noise. "That fund, Atlantic Education Fund, is directly tied to the Trump Foundation." Reporters lunged forward, cameras flashing, microphones thrust into the air. Chaos rippled across the room, but Jasmine stood still, calm amid the storm. Barron slammed both fists onto the table. "Liars," he roared. "You people are liars. She bought this man. She paid him to come here." His voice cracked with fury, echoing off the chamber walls. His face was flushed deep red, sweat dripping from his hairline. The photographers caught every frame, immortalizing his rage. The chairman banged his gavel for order, but Jasmine didn't move. She spoke quietly, every word cutting clean through the noise. "Mr. Klein is not a politician," she said. "He's a father with a son preparing to take the estate, and he could not stay silent while corruption is glorified as success." The room fell still. Her voice had the weight of conviction, sharp and calm like a blade against glass. Klein's eyes lowered, emotion flickering across his face. He leaned toward the microphone, his tone breaking slightly. "I risk my career because I refuse to let my child grow up in a world where intelligence is measured by money," he said. The honesty in his voice filled the room. Even the cameras seemed to hesitate, as if unwilling to interrupt. A hush spread over the chamber, long, heavy, undeniable. Barron's chest heaved. His anger had nowhere left to go. He sank back into his seat, staring down at the polished wood of the desk. His fingers twitched, but didn't rise. For the first time, he looked cornered, smaller than the moment demanded. Jasmine turned toward him, her tone calm, almost sorrowful, yet unyielding. "This isn't a conspiracy," she said clearly. "It's integrity." The words hung in the air like a final verdict. No one spoke. The flash of cameras resumed, slow, rhythmic, like the sound of a gavel closing the truth in place. The silence stretched thick and endless until Jasmine reached once more for the red folder. The cameras zoomed in. Her fingers slid a new document across the polished desk, the paper glinting under the fluorescent lights. "I have one final exhibit," she said. Her tone was steady, her gaze fixed on Barron. The screen behind her flickered alive, displaying two official SAT reports side by side. These, she continued, both carry the same testing ID, T214983. On the left, the name Barron Trump with a perfect score, 1600. On the right, Alexander Lang, a real student score, 1420. The difference hit like a slap. Reporters gasped audibly, cameras clicking in rapid bursts. Barron's lawyers bent over their laptops, typing furiously. Jasmine stepped forward, pointing to the duplicate ID. Alexander Lang's exam ID was cloned and replaced with Barron Trump's name, she said, her voice cutting clean through the rising tension. "This is not a clerical error. This is data forgery, an intentional act of national record manipulation." Her words landed with precision. The committee members shifted in their seats, the weight of the evidence pulling the room tighter with every second. Someone coughed nervously. The chairman's face was pale. The truth was no longer abstract. It was glowing right there on the screen. A congressman rose from his chair, his voice loud and sharp. "This is clear evidence of tampering," he said. "Who gave the order?" The question echoed across the chamber like a gunshot. Every camera turned back to Jasmine. She didn't blink. She gestured toward another page in the report. "According to the internal access log," she said, "the command originated from an email registered as R. Trump. That name appears on the authorization field. It could belong to a family member." A collective gasp rippled through the audience. Barron's composure shattered. He sprang from his chair, face blazing red. "You're lying," he shouted, slamming his palms on the table. "You're destroying my reputation. This is political theater." His voice cracked, trembling with rage and disbelief. The sound of his hand striking the desk echoed off marble walls, raw and human. His lawyers tried to pull him back, whispering for calm, but he shoved them aside, his eyes wild. Jasmine remained perfectly still. Her calmness was unnerving, almost unbearable. When she spoke, her voice was low and unwavering. "No one is destroying you," she said, her words slow and deliberate. "You did that yourself when you let someone else buy your honor." The line cut through the air like a blade. Barron froze, the anger in his eyes faltering for the first time. The room fell dead silent again, heavy with shame and realization. No one moved. A pen dropped somewhere in the press gallery, the sound impossibly loud. One reporter's hand trembled as her pen slipped from her fingers and hit the floor. Barron's breath came shallow. His eyes darted to the screen, still displaying the two names, his and Lang's, linked forever, by proof he couldn't erase. Around him, senators, journalists, and spectators stood frozen. Every camera focused on his face, catching the moment arrogance turned into fear. Jasmine didn't move, didn't gloat. She simply stood in the center of the storm she had unleashed. And for the first time, even the flashes of cameras felt like whispers in the quiet, a silence that belonged to truth alone. The air inside the chamber had turned dense, suffocating. Every breath felt like it carried weight. Papers rustled, cameras whispered, and even the marble walls seemed to vibrate from the pressure of the moment. The chairman, visibly shaken, lifted the gavel with both hands. The sound that followed was not just a strike, it was a verdict. Bang! "The committee has decided," he declared, his voice echoing through the hall, "to forward all case materials to the Department of Justice for criminal investigation." For a brief heartbeat, silence consumed the room. Then gasps broke loose, reporters whispering, senators shifting in disbelief, the hum of history being written in real time. Barron Trump sat frozen, his confidence finally fractured. His hands trembled visibly on the table, fingertips glistening with sweat. The color drained from his face. He muttered under his breath words that only the nearest microphones caught. "This can't be happening. My father won't let this stand." His voice cracked on the last syllable, not with anger but with fear, the kind that comes when even legacy can't protect you. One of his lawyers leaned close, whispering something hurried, but Barron didn't hear him. He was staring ahead blankly, eyes wide as if the world had suddenly tilted. Jasmine Crockett rose slowly from her seat. The sound of her chair scraping against the floor sliced through the murmurs. She took a step forward, heels clicking sharply on the marble, until she stood just across from Barron. The room went quiet again, every lens trained on her. Her tone was calm, almost gentle, but every word struck with precision. "You have everything," she said, her voice carrying across the chamber. "Power, money, fame." She paused, leaning in slightly, her gaze steady as steel. "The only thing you never had," she continued, "is the courage to be honest." The line hit like a lightning bolt, sharp, final, impossible to refute. Barron flinched as if struck. His lips parted, but no sound came out. He turned his head away, hiding his face from the flashing cameras. Reporters crowded the aisles, microphones raised, lights bursting like fireworks. The chaotic rhythm of shutters filled the air. 100 angles of the same image were captured in that instant, Jasmine standing upright, poised like justice incarnate, while Barron slumped in defeat. The chairman tried to restore order, but it was pointless. History doesn't wait for silence. A voice rose above the chaos. "Congresswoman Crockett," a reporter shouted from the crowd, "are you afraid of retaliation after this?" The question hung in the air, sharp and dangerous. Jasmine turned toward the direction of the voice, her expression unreadable for a moment. Then she gave a faint, knowing smile. "Yes," she said simply, "but I'm more afraid of silence." Her words cut through the noise like a blade through glass. The entire chamber seemed to hold its breath again. Even her opponents didn't dare interrupt. The chairman nodded gravely, signaling the end. Jasmine moved back to the witness table, pen in hand, and signed the official report, the motion that would transfer the case to the Department of Justice. The ink shimmered faintly under the camera lights. When she set the pen down, it felt like the closing note of a symphony. Barron didn't look up. He pushed back his chair, the sound screeching across the floor, and walked toward the exit without a word. Cameras trailed him like predators, catching every step of his retreat. The great chamber fell into a hush, broken only by the soft rustle of paper and the echo of his fading footsteps. Outside, the story detonated. By nightfall, every major network had switched to live coverage. The Department of Education, the Department of Justice, and the FBI all announced the formation of a joint investigation task force. A spokesperson for the Justice Department confirmed all individuals involved in the alleged manipulation of standardized testing records are under federal review. Across America, TV anchors spoke with disbelief as the ticker scrolled, "College Board Executives Under Investigation. White House Connections Unclear." Within 24 hours, the leadership of the College Board was suspended pending inquiry. Offices in New York and Washington were raided for internal records. Leaked footage showed agents carrying out boxes marked confidential. On social media, clips from Jasmine's final confrontation replayed in endless loops, each time accompanied by stunned commentary. Talk shows debated whether she had just sparked the biggest education reform scandal in American history. CNN opened its evening broadcast with the headline, "The Woman Who Made a Nation Look in the Mirror." The anchor, visibly moved, spoke over images of Jasmine's testimony. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett's relentless pursuit of truth has shaken the very foundations of institutional privilege. Tonight, the question isn't just about Barron Trump's test score. It's about what kind of country we want to be. The report ended with applause from the studio audience, rare for a news broadcast, but fitting for a moment that felt bigger than politics. The New York Times followed with a front-page editorial titled, "Truth Needs No Power, Only Courage." The article praised Jasmine's resolve, calling her a reminder that honesty is not weakness, but defiance in its purest form. Pundits and professors appeared on morning shows, quoting her line word for word. Overnight, her face became a symbol of fearless integrity, the red folder, a new American icon of transparency. Across the nation, the story sparked something deeper. Students from every major university organized rallies calling for justice in education. In Boston, crowds of young people gathered outside the College Board's regional headquarters, chanting through megaphones, "Real scores, real justice." In Los Angeles, 1,000 teenagers marched down Wilshire Boulevard holding banners that read, "Truth over privilege." The footage spread across evening news segments, the energy raw, unstoppable. High schools followed suit. Teachers paused classes to discuss the meaning of fairness. Parents wrote open letters to Congress demanding systemic reform. The movement gained a name overnight, "Real Grades for Real Fairness." Within days, over 2,000 SAT results across the country were re-audited for irregularities. Several private prep centers quietly shut down their connections to political families suddenly under investigation. Jasmine, meanwhile, refused interviews. She stayed silent, declining TV offers and magazine profiles. Instead, she spent long nights reviewing policy drafts with her team, her focus unchanged. In Washington, her allies whispered that she was working on new legislation to protect academic integrity at the federal level. But in public, she let the movement speak for itself. Barron, once untouchable, vanished from the spotlight. His social media accounts went dark. His name became shorthand for scandal, a cautionary tale of what happens when arrogance meets accountability. Late-night hosts joked about him, but even their laughter carried unease. America wasn't mocking him. It was judging the system that built him. By the end of the week, pollsters reported a shift in public sentiment. Trust in government institutions had risen for the first time in years. Parents across the country told reporters they felt seen. On talk radio, callers described Jasmine's testimony as the moment truth came back to Washington. Inside her quiet congressional office, Jasmine watched one of the broadcasts in silence. Her assistant handed her a printed headline, CNN's quote, now framed across every news site, "The woman who made the system face itself." Jasmine set it aside, her expression calm. "This isn't about me," she said softly. "It's about the millions who never got their chance." Her assistant nodded but didn't reply. Outside the window, reporters were still waiting on the Capitol steps, hoping for one more comment. Jasmine didn't give them any. She simply stood, straightened her jacket, and turned off the TV. The noise of the world dimmed, but the impact of her words didn't fade. It pulsed quietly through every newsroom, every classroom, every home watching from afar. And somewhere across America, a student studying late at night whispered the same words that had shaken the nation. The only thing that matters more than success is the courage to earn it honestly. A year passed, but the tremor Jasmine Crockett had unleashed still rippled across America. What began as a single congressional hearing had become a national awakening. In every state, the echoes of the SAT conspiracy forced lawmakers to act. By the spring of 2026, half the country had introduced new transparency laws for standardized testing. Score audits became mandatory with full digital trails open to public review. The College Board, once untouchable, was forced to dismantle its entire scoring infrastructure and rebuild it under federal supervision. Old executives resigned in disgrace, replaced by new leadership sworn in under public oath. The organization's new motto printed on its website read simply, "Integrity before prestige." Schools began to feel different. The sense of untouchable privilege that had haunted the system for decades was breaking apart piece by piece. The story had become legend in classrooms. Teachers told their students about the woman who had faced down power and won with truth alone. Jasmine Crockett's name appeared in textbooks next to the civil rights pioneers she had once admired. Her red folder, the same one that carried the evidence, was now displayed in the Smithsonian under the label, "The Turning Point: Education and Ethics in the 21st Century." Journalists called her the conscience of Congress. Late-night hosts, usually cynical, spoke her name with reverence. The fight she began had moved beyond politics. It had become part of America's DNA. Then came the night at Harvard. The auditorium was packed to capacity. Students, professors, journalists, and senators filled every seat. A banner above the stage read, "Harvard Forum on Truth in Education." When Jasmine stepped into the spotlight, the applause was deafening. She waited for it to fade, her face calm, but her eyes burning with purpose. A nation, she said, her voice clear, is only as strong as the honesty of its education. A nation that lets its schools be bought has already sold its future. The hall went silent. Her words landed heavy, unshakable. Cameras caught every second, and by morning clips of her speech had been viewed by tens of millions. She didn't speak long, but what she said became immortal, etched into quotes replayed on every major network. "A nation is only strong," she repeated, "when its education cannot be bought." Across the country, reactions poured in. University deans pledged to audit admission processes. State boards promised new oversight committees. Parents wrote letters thanking Jasmine for bringing justice into the classroom. But not all eyes were on her. In Florida, inside a sun-drenched mansion overlooking the ocean, Barron Trump sat alone. His world had shrunk from podiums and cameras to silence and regret. A half-empty glass of whiskey stood beside a folded newspaper. The headline read, "The Law Named After the Woman Who Exposed the President's Son." He unfolded a sheet of paper, a handwritten letter, his confession. The ink was uneven where his hand had trembled. "I stayed silent when the truth was twisted," he wrote. "And silence is its own kind of crime." He stopped, staring out toward the Atlantic, its horizon endless, unforgiving. He whispered to himself, "Maybe this is what justice feels like when it finally catches up." The sound of the waves was his only answer. He sealed the letter but never sent it. It was later leaked to the press, printed word for word in the Washington Post. For the first time, the nation pitied him not as a villain, but as a cautionary tale, a boy born into power, undone by privilege. The next chapter of Jasmine's fight began in the halls of Congress once again. The media had called it the logical conclusion to her crusade, but Jasmine called it something simpler: the Fair Academic Act of 2026. The bill proposed sweeping reforms, mandatory transparency in testing agencies, criminal penalties for data manipulation, and federal oversight of all education boards. Lobbyists fought it tooth and nail. Money poured in from corporations, terrified of losing control. But Jasmine stood unmoved, facing them with the same steel she'd shown the Trumps. "If truth can't survive politics," she told reporters, "then politics isn't worth saving." The vote passed barely, but when it did, cheers erupted across the chamber floor. History had turned again. At the signing ceremony, the White House lawn glittered under morning light. Jasmine stood beside the president as cameras lined the stage. The bill rested on a mahogany table between them, flanked by pens engraved with the seal of the United States. When the president finished signing, he turned to Jasmine. "You've changed the way this nation thinks about fairness," he said. She took the microphone. Her voice was soft but carried across the entire lawn. If the next generation understands that justice can defeat power, she said, then there's still hope for America. Applause rose like a wave rolling through the crowd and spilling beyond the gates. While the country celebrated the scene elsewhere, told another story. In that same Florida mansion, Barron sat before the television, the glow from the screen reflecting off his hollow eyes. The broadcast showed Jasmine standing tall, the crowd chanting her name. His fingers dug into the newspaper clutched in his hand, the headline now cruelly familiar, the law named after the woman who exposed the president's son. He crumpled it slowly, the paper crackling like fire. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he whispered, "She won." He looked out at the horizon again where the sun met the water, and something in his expression cracked neither anger nor sorrow, just quiet surrender. Back in Texas, Jasmine's homecoming was small and unannounced. The cameras didn't follow her this time. She walked alone through the narrow hallway of her district office where sunlight spilled across old frame photos of her legal days defending clients no one else would touch. She opened the door to her desk, still the same one she'd used before Congress. From her bag, she took out a single object, the red pen she'd carried through every investigation, the same one she'd signed the justice referral with. She placed it on the table carefully as if setting down a torch. Then she sat breathing deeply, the sound of the Texas wind rustling faintly through the window blinds. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to rest. That night, a journalist from The New Yorker interviewed one of Jasmine's former aides. "Do you think she realizes the scale of what she's done?" he asked. The aide smiled softly. "She never cared about scale," she said. "She only cared about truth." As the credits of history rolled forward, a voiceover echoed a narration used later in documentaries played over Jasmine's quiet return to her desk. "No one chooses where they are born," the voice said, "but everyone chooses how they live. One honest person can make an entire system tremble, and that is the power of truth." The scene faded on Jasmine sitting by her desk, the red pen gleaming faintly beside her. Outside, the Texas sky burned orange with dusk. Somewhere far away, waves crashed against the Florida shore. The world moved on, but it did so in her light. Thank you for watching until this moment and for standing with us on this journey for justice. Your support means everything. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss what's next. And we'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and let us know what moved you most in this story. Together, our voices make a difference.